Good afternoon, Miss Carlson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
That's good to hear. I have a couple questions for you about your life in Austria under Hitler and his Third Reich. What was your personal experience at being a young girl living in Austria with World War II going on around you?
It was a very chaotic situation, a kind of restless situation all the time because we never knew when the bombing would take place. And we knew because I remember we had a radio and there was an alarm in there and they gave us the signal that the bombing will take place, and we were moving really, if you could, quickly to the fallout shelters. And it usually was in fruit cellars or wine cellars. And I remember we had beds in there, and food was in there, chamber parts was in there, and it was covered up in camouflage. I remember that very well, like would be today.
So these fallout shelters were hidden away so that you could safely get there.
Yeah, they were covered up. Usually people didn't know where they were. So,
when you were a little girl in Austria, were there different types of foods or certain items that were rationed?
That was actually rationed during the war, and the war broke out in 1940. Mm-hmm. So I was born before 1940. They had the flour, the sugar, even drinks like beer. What's that other one? That seltzer water, you couldn't even buy that anymore either. And meat was rationed because whatever pigs the farmers had, they were better not caught if they fattened up a pig for themselves, because usually what happened, they will take them and they shoot them, They will put them in the jail or whatever. They have to pay heavy fine if somebody reports them. And I think the eggs and that stuff was all rationed too.
So those were rationed for the soldiers? So I
have to tell you that, right? That was even rationed for the common people too, because there was what they call, you people did it here too, they call it hamster. Hamster is a slang one, trading off. What you call it?
Like trade?
Yeah, trade.
So they would trade it.
They trade off for something else, what they had in exchange.
Okay, so the flour that was being rationed,
yes,
and the bacon, and the eggs,
and the milk was even rationed too, because we could go to the dairy in the town where I grew up, and we only had probably approximately 2 liters. That's all we could get for 6 kids, maybe even more. But because I remember one time we were playing so foolish and they hit me in the eye. Mm-hmm. So, my brother and sister, this one, when we went up there, and I think one of here, and the eyebrow, they hit me, it didn't do anything much. So
everything that the farmers had or the seller had was then traded? So there was no...
exchange, I guess you call it. You trade off, And I remember when the war was over, you still couldn't get a lot of stuff. The people from Vienna or other in the inner cities, they would come out to the farm and exchange stuff.
So it was
potatoes.
So it was trade. So you would trade. You would trade flour and eggs for different goods.
Goods, yeah. That's what they did. So, and meat was especially. I don't think I ever remember we had any what you call cold cuts or anything like this. I don't even remember we had that. Mm-hmm. Because I always talk about when we kids made our own fire. My mom wasn't home a lot of times, and we made the fire and we put the dirty potatoes, sliced them on top of the stove, and it reminded me of the pommes frites. The pommes frites is your chips. Because potato chips, because they bubbled off, and they were the best potato chips, better than what you have here. Because
so you found ways to make what you had work
what for you. Had, yeah. And earlier we talked about another stuff. My mom did fatten up a pig, and I guess we hit the pig somewhere. I don't know. It don't remember all that stuff. And the pig was blind because the pig never went outside anymore, Then I don't know who my mom hired to have the pig killed, so we had some meat,
So when you were
It was after the war, I think, even.
So when you were living in Austria, what was it like for your siblings and your mom? Like, what were the conditions?
I don't know how I'm going to explain that to you. It was almost what you call... My sister and we talk about... Who's walking by there again? My sister and I talk about, because we have this coronavirus now, we were freer in our situation than what you hear now with this coronavirus. At least we could go out there, we could play on the meadow and catch the silver strings from the airplanes when they went across to bomb. And we played with them. And the silver string were the radar blocks. Mm-hmm. When they blocked the radar, And then the other stuff is that I remember during the war, when they had the siren going and you would have to go to the fallout shelter. And I remember a few times only that I went to the fallout shelter, and all I can remember, there were beds down there and chamber pots. I don't know about food, so that was down there. Until...
What did the Austrian people collectively think about Hitler basically marching in to Austria and claiming that it's now part of his Third Reich?
Okay, I can tell you a story. Because
were they happy with that?
Yes. There were some people who were very jubilant, especially one of the main streets in Austria, which was the Maria means Mary Street, Maria Hilferstraße. They were jubilant that he took over. And the other one was for the, whatever you call it, for the people. Kärntnerstraße was the other one for the what you call them?
I'm not sure.
No, wait a second. The women who go out and sell themselves.
Oh, prostitutes.
Prostitutes. For the prostitutes was the Kärntnerstraße. That was always known to me when I even lived in Vienna for a few years. People would go there and sell themselves, the prostitutes, But Maria Hilferstraße was where they were always connected to the inner city. In the inner city, there was no traffic. That was totally off limits, There was just public transportation if there was any going through, so because it was all the nice things.
So were Austrians accepting of Hitler's marching into Austria and taking it?
Yes, a lot of them. Yes, a lot did. I hate to put it that way.
Were there different people groups that didn't like it?
Yeah, there were groups who didn't like it because they knew.
Can you name a couple of those groups?
Oh, well, I don't know. I couldn't tell. I know where I lived, where I was born, there were a lot of people for Hitler. Yes, because that's why there were so many people from that town had to go into war. My dad was one of them.
Did the Austrian government or the Nazis set up Hitler Youth schools in Austria?
Yes, they had Hitler Youth. The Hitler Youth, I knew about it partially only, but there was Hitler Youth always trained, and there were different places where they trained. And there was also, during the war, when Hitler was in power, he misplaced different people. He would give them a different kind of by misplacing you talking about, he gave them the equivalency of their property that they had where they were farming in another direction, totally different. They had to change.
So Hitler would take their property,
yes,
in exchange give them a different property?
A different property and put some, I think at the troop, in one of that area, Steckler, I think, was one of them where he had the troops exercise and all that stuff.
would take property away from people.
From people, yes.
But then give them property in return.
In return that they can continue being the farming.
It was a forceful taking of property.
Forceful, yes.
They didn't have an option.
No, they didn't have an option, and they had no say-so either. They had to just adjust, to it, so. And I think that's what happened to some of my people, probably. They were forced.
Did it happen to you?
Well, I was home still, a kid, so And I remember a lot of stuff when the Russian people came through with their big troops. They actually went across the small little, there was a small river, because that's where we put my brother in the baby buggy and rolled him down to the river.
So
he got out of it anyway.
when the Nazi troops came in to Austria to occupy it, you said that the people were jubilant. They were happy.
Jubilant, yes, they were happy.
So, according to some historical records, people would actually invite the soldiers into their homes and feed them sometimes as they were moving along the trail.
That is true. That is true.
Do you remember having any Nazi soldiers in your home?
No.
No, you never.
But we had it surrounding our area where we lived, because the Russian people did slaughtering. They probably stole their cow, whatever, I cannot remember, and they hung it up and slaughtered it, and they had what they call in military terms to speak mess hall stuff, equipment out there where they cooked openly,
like a big
fire.
Cafeteria?
Yes, open fire. No, it was out there in open. Because we kids would go and beg them for food, and they did give us some food, the Russian people.
The Russians or the...
The Russian. That was the Russian people already. We were occupied partially.
So Austria was split? Between
all the 4 airlines. Where I grew up was mostly Russian coming through. And I think up there, Salzburg, there was the American people. In English, all 4 airlines went through there.
So this was towards the end of the war?
That was towards the end of the war. And I remember when we went to school, we had to salute to a picture to Hitler, even when you were a kid, And the Gendarmerie was right across from the school. The Gendarmerie is the police station. That's a French word, Gendarmerie. Mm-hmm. They watch constantly anyway what you did. And I also remember when I went to school, they already used a lot of their books and studies that they had where they marked certain words out in the literature and any of the writing.
So a filter to filter the ideas?
They filtered the ideas about, I would imagine it was in regard to the Kaiser Wilhelm and all them, whatever the words and that stuff was in there, because the older people worshipped the Kaiser as the god. That's really true. That's true.
Kaiser Wilhelm was the Kaiser of Germany. Before Hitler.
Yeah, but we were under the Habsburg people. There are a lot of people thought a lot of the Habsburg people a lot too. Mm-hmm. So
would you say that a sense of national pride brought the Austrians and the Germans together?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I would think so, yes. They were together in many ways. And my uncle was telling this. When it came to the end of war and he met another woman out there, was my aunt then by marriage, because his first wife was already gone anyway, my uncle. And they couldn't enter Austria anymore. The borders were closed. So they had to go over Czechoslovakia down to Hungary. And Hungary, there was a border open that they could return to Austria.
Why were those borders closed?
Because of the war. It's still post-war. Remember the Iron Curtain and all that stuff? Mm-hmm. I remember the Iron Curtain because when I was in Vienna, and then when I went with my girlfriend to the borders further down Graz, which is by Yugoslavia and all them areas, you could hear the shots all the time, and the people were wanting to get across the Iron Curtain. They would not, they never make it. They just shot them right then and there. And in Vienna, if you go further down, you could see the thing too that happened. You could hear it, Mm-hmm.
How about after the war? This is 1945 and beyond. What was
in 1945? I don't think I was home anymore. I went to the orphanage. So,
what was the overall attitude of the German people, Austrians and people there after the war?
They had to go, a lot of the people had to start all over again. That's what it really was, because there was a lot of stuff not even to be had anymore. You could not buy. It was, the country was very poor, and I could remember that his name was, the president of Austria was Renner. I'm not sure if it was Karl Renner. I think it was Karl Renner, and he brought the Austrian people to its what you call it?
He built them back up?
Build them back up, yes. Really build them up, In the one mattress, or assist, I guess you call it, she had one of the highest titles that a nun actually could receive, because she was so efficient that I don't know how she did it or what she did, that the farmers always delivered certain items for free, I guess, for this home where I grew up, in the orphanage, because they brought cabbage, carrots, and then in the summer months we would go, there were 2 months off. In the summer we would go out to the fields and pick currant berries, and they used the currant berries to make marmalade or jelly, that has to be prepared a certain way, and because they have a lot of seeds in there, so that was, they cooked that in and made marmalade and jelly and all that stuff out. So, and they had different currant berries. They had the red currant berries, the white currant berries, and the black currant berries. The black currant berries are very hard to grow, and they're a little bit more tart. Mm-hmm. I talk about it because when I was over there, I brought some of them into this country. And they never found out where I had them hidden. And I grew them. They were nice. And there was another one called cross between the currant berry and the gooseberries. And that bush is called Josta. The berries are a little bit bigger, like cranberries, probably. That's how big those berries get. They're better. Mm-hmm. Different than others is acidity. They're sweeter, they're good.
So when you were in Austria, what was your personal opinion of Hitler and his Third Reich?
Well, I think what I could understand, I didn't like him because we were under because of the war situation. You remember the war, mm-hmm. when they always were bombing. You could, because we could hear the bombing, and the windows would. Some of the windows would even break. Probably they were not very good windows.
So you weren't a fan of him at all?
No.
Did your mother like him?
I think my mother probably didn't, because it took her husband away. My dad was killed, in World War II. Out in the Normandy, that's how my dad got killed. The 27th of August, 1944. That was even before the end of the war. That was, he was transporting troops 20 miles north from St. Quentin. Quentin, it's spelled. And it's up from Paris, somewhere towards the north, in the Normandy. That's where he got killed. His whole troop, I cannot remember how many people there were. There were quite a bit of people, and they exploded the whole thing. They set on fire. That's how they died.